Just a good evening to everyone again. Thank you very much for joining us for the last in season 1 of Your Digital Life. And this is episode 4, and we're going to be looking at the Digital Charter, which the MCM pupils have made this year. And we're going to see how that links to Common Sense Media. But before we get going on the Charter, I am just going to show you a very short 45-second clip from Common Sense Media about their take on digital citizenship. Okay.
Thank you. Common Sense Media is where we have based most of our digital well-being and where we're building our program from. And they base a digital citizenship around 6 different areas. And a lot of these tie very much into our well-being curriculum because we are parts of a digital world and we can't avoid that. So the headings are fairly small on this slide, so I will tell you what they are. From a Common Sense Media background, and then we will show you how we've adapted them slightly for Marlborough. So media balance and well-being, making sure we've got that balance in our digital lives, that not everything is on screen. Privacy and security, such an important part of life nowadays. Digital footprints and identity, defining who we are and how the rest of the world sees us. Relationships and communication, realizing the power of our words and actions. And then in the bottom right, news and media literacy, being critical thinkers about what we see and also creating content. And I've left the last one, the purple one, cyberbullying, digital drama and hate speech, which very much focuses on the negative, but it's something that we have to be very, very aware of. We want our students to be aware of how to deal with it, how not to be part of it. But we decided that at Marlborough, we're going to sort of slightly change the terminology there. So when we start talking about this, Duncan's going to start talking about the Digital Charter.
There we go. Thanks, Rachel. So at the start of the year, I formed a digital ambassadors group in the senior school and set them the task of coming up with a digital charter. And as such, as you can see, a number of the themes are very, very closely related to the Common Sense Media curriculum. However, we did feel that we wanted to make some of the language, 1, more positive, but 2, more pupil-friendly for different parts of the school. So we've gone for 6 key areas, like the Common Sense Media curriculum, changed it slightly: digital wellness, footprint and identity, privacy and security, news and media literacy. So they're very, very similar. But the 2 that we have changed slightly, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about these in a minute, is the element of responsible communication and also those mindful interactions and relationships. So again, focusing very much on the positive element. So Rachel's going to run us through how the digital ambassadors came up with what they did surrounding the first 2 elements of the charter.
So first of all, talking about digital wellness, of course, this is really tied into our physical health as well as our mental health. And the way we look at it is by asking the children questions, which encourages them to reflect on what they're thinking about. So on the next slide, you'll see some of the questions that will prompt them to be thinking about their digital wellness, how they compare themselves with others and what they use in terms of content. Do they track their time? Do they limit their time on screens? How do they avoid distractions? Are they able to turn off notifications? They know how to do that. And do you put your main life roles first? You know, are you present with the people who are in your home? Are you present with the people who are sitting at your table? Or are you constantly trying to engage in social media? So by asking these questions, it encourages them to think about that. Moving on, footprint and identity. We know how important it is, and it will come up more than once during this presentation, how to protect your identity and be careful with your information. Making sure that your online and your offline identity match each other. And again, coming to those questions, are you asking questions that you would be comfortable to answer? Do I want to be seen? Do I want this information to be seen by future teachers, employers, or my friends? Am I sharing everything that I do online? Do I need to share everything I do online? These questions constantly prompting them to reflect for themselves about what content they're providing. Back to you, Duncan. Duncan, your microphone's off.
Technical issues, sorry. So the next category we're looking at is privacy and security. So the key element here really is how are you keeping your personal data private and secure? So the digital ambassadors wanted people to think about limiting information, protecting your privacy, so not having GPS on, for example, on your phone, not sharing phone numbers and card details, but also thinking about that sensitive information that you may have. And obviously, as you get older, you have more and more sensitive information, which you don't want to share with people. So the key to this is the questions that are wrapped around it. And again, our digital ambassadors wanted people to think specifically about, are you aware of what you share? Are you using social media that is age appropriate? So for example, you know, when you do start using Instagram or Snapchat, who are you sharing that information with? And do you take care of it? Obviously, when they start to get things like bank accounts and passwords and security data, do they know where to store it and how to store it? And the next category we looked at was news and media literacy. So this is something that we often talk about at different parts of the school, and getting people to think about the information that they receive and getting them to be critical thinkers. So it's not just a digital skill, this is a skill that we embody across all of our curriculum within MCM. So how do they process that information, and do they cite their sources? So when they're using information, do they make sure that they are particularly referencing where it's from, which media journal, for example? So again, the DAs came up with these great questions, and they're going to making a series of videos which we're going to be promoting throughout the college in the next academic year. So getting people to think about how do they react to breaking news, which obviously all of us, you know, this has been a big part of the various MCOs that we've been through and lockdowns. We've all had to become masters of identifying hoaxes and fakes, and is it from a trusted government source? But the big things really are the things that are the temptations. So, you know, clicking for cash, for example, you know, there's no such thing as, you know, too much of a good thing. You know, if it's too good to be true, the chances are it's not true. And then things like your filter bubble. Now, a lot of people don't really understand that, but that's based on what they search for, the cookies that they've got on their computers, and obviously where they go for their information, and actually getting people to vary their sources of information. Otherwise, it's always the same. Okay. So the last one I'm going to talk about here is this element of responsible communication and making sort of positive choices. So this is one of the things that we did change up, and the DAs really were keen to do that. Obviously, always quite an ambiguous topic about images and nude images and relationships that are formed online, and thinking about, you know, what does it mean and what could the potential ramifications be of your actions, as well as forming those positive online relationships. So they're going to be asking questions, and we're going to be asking these questions constantly moving forward of our pupil body, which we do already, but we're just going to be doing it on a more frequent basis in terms of, do you really think before you post or text? Do you, are you sending inappropriate images? Or are you receiving them? And in which case, are you reporting? Are you blocking people? And probably more importantly than anything is just the fact that we are all humans. We're not AI bots. And as such, we have to be careful with our words and our choices. So knowing the power of our words and actions is absolutely critical. So back to you, Mrs. Lockyer.
Thank you. So moving on, we go on to mindful interactions and relationships. And again, making sure that we're looking at this in a positive manner and tying it into how we want the children to behave in everyday life as well, being kind, respectful, and non-judgmental. We start in pre-prep talking a lot about the think mnemonic. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And again, if we start thinking about those questions that we ask, what can I do if somebody asks me to do something inappropriate? How do we react to that? Do we get the children to practice these scenarios? Do you think carefully when posting? How would you feel if you were treated the same way? Building that skill of empathy. And what do you do when you see hate speech? How do you react to it? What are you going to do that's positive to react to it rather than joining in or any other negative responses?
Okay, so that is a quick run through our charter, and thank you very much to Mrs. Lockyer for assisting me with that. Hopefully you might have some questions that are wrapped around that. We have actually got a number of questions which have already been sent through by various parents and staff. So we're gonna have a look at those, and I would like to invite any comments on those as we go through. So the first question, and this is where we're going to introduce Mrs. EJ and Mr. Cowie for their opinions. So I got two questions which are very much wrapped around the same theme of how can I get my children to benefit from being digital citizens at MCM, and how can the school educate on negative impact of digital tools? And the one thing that I would say is that in the curation of the digital charter, I've been amazed by the pupils. We've had house representation across every single house in the senior school, and we've been working with pupils in year 8, and their perception and their knowledge has really been first class. So I feel that we've got a lot of knowledge out there, and next year the Digital Ambassadors Programme is very much going to be one where we're going to support and we're going to help, and we're going to have more conversations throughout the college. And obviously we're hoping that we're going to be back face to face as soon as possible, and that's going to be easier to have those conversations, and obviously they will be a lot more meaningful when we have them as part of our wellbeing curriculum. So I'm going to just ask Mrs. Lockyer about the digital wellness programme, and what does it look like at the moment for different age groups?
So digital wellness, as I said, is very much embedded across our prep school curriculum, starting down in pre-prep, where they don't spend as much time on devices, or for the most part don't spend as much time on devices, and certainly not as much independently. But we start looking at how to balance that time online and offline. We start talking about age-appropriate materials, so they're aware of what tools they should be using and can use, and what maybe they need to be thinking about. We also start introducing the idea of active and passive time online, whether they're just withdrawing content, watching YouTube videos, or are they creating content? Are they making movies? Are they singing into their iPads? So really starting from a young age to recognize the different ways they can use technology, but also to balance their time. Are they spending enough time with their immediate environment, not just immersing themselves in an online world? And that develops, as you can imagine, all the way through prep school as the children become more independent and into their personal lives and using tech in school as well as at home.
And Mr Cowie, would you be able to just sort of elaborate a little bit in terms of some of the plans for next year that we've got with Common Sense Media, with the Digital Charter, and how we're looking with wellbeing within the senior school?
Yep. In terms of, just as Rachel said there, it's looking to get pupils thinking about what they're doing online, talking about what they're doing, and using devices creatively. So an element of that is within the wellbeing program and tutoring. It's looking the creative side. The devices can be fantastic, and as a teacher of computer science, that's something we have a great opportunity right the way through pre-prep, prep. Look at building the skills so that it's a mindset toward problem solving. That's what we're looking at, and not a device so you're really a passive user of some game that's designed with hooks to build in addiction. You're looking at being creative with a device, whatever that device is, and getting into good habits. And the Digital Charter, I think, is excellent and all more powerful for being designed by students. So next year, it will be embedding the Digital Charter, not just in wellbeing lessons, but it's going to be within our pupil council. There's 2 standing points on the agendas for our pupil councils. One is wellbeing and the other is the Digital Charter. So how are we living this out in terms of our everyday lives? And are we getting the balance right in terms of devices that are making life better rather than building an addiction and being a distraction?
Thanks, Mr Cowie. That's excellent. Now I'm going to pass over to Mrs EJ here, because this is a great question, and I know that's one that a lot of parents will have. And it came from a parent in the prep school, and they were saying, what do I want, or what do I do if I don't want my child to use a screen over the holiday period? Quite a common question. So over to you, Mrs EJ.
Hi, yes. Yes, please don't get into a screaming match and say no, which they shout even louder. Yes. As parents, we are all aware that that's never a very successful strategy. And so you have to enter into the subtle art of negotiation. There will be times when absolutely you say no, and I am sure everybody in this group could think of a time when they've just had to, they felt that they've absolutely had to. But what we don't want to do is to create the screen as an other than family issue, something that you do in secret, and that you are going to be using as an opportunity to get back at your parents. So and so we come to the fact that you need to, and I would suggest this is done right at the beginning of the holidays, maybe before the holidays even start, when we're all calm and excited about spending time together. We agree what sensible use of a screen looks like. That you might say to them, okay, we need some time. I don't ever want to see it at meal times. Perhaps you could have, when you get up in the morning, don't want to see screens, I'll dig out the screens after we've had breakfast, and you can have a bit of a time in the morning. Or we're going to be busy doing things in the morning and you can have some time in the afternoon. I think with all these things, it's really good to set those parameters and those agreements at a time before they've become an argument. So it's right, it's the holidays coming up. Look, I know you're going to be irritated by this, but let's just make sure we use the screens sensibly and have those conversations about why is it an issue. See if they can identify, which is what we do in school, is they can identify those times when they start getting tetchy because they've spent too much time, and the addictive quality of time spent on the screen. So do it at a time of no threat. It's not, you're not sitting down at the end of the first week going, right, that's it, I have had enough. We've got to do something about this. Try and have the conversations way before you get to that point, and talk about what feels reasonable, and why you're even having to have the conversation about how it's used. As Mrs Lockyer was saying earlier, obviously you have access to everything they should be. If they are flipping down the lid of a laptop, or they are hiding the screen from you, then you're pretty sure it's probably not good use, and do feel absolutely empowered to have a conversation about what it is that they're trying to hide, what it is that's going on that's making them feel so uncomfortable in your presence that they're trying to hide it from you. And again, agreeing the things that the screens will be used for way before it becomes an issue is helpful. I make all this advice as if this is what I do successfully with my children all the time. I know what I should do with them, but it's not always right. The other thing I think is useful is to model appropriate use of a screen yourself. We've all, I am sure, been accused by our children of, well, you haven't put it down, you're still reaching for it. So I am going to ask you to yes, brighten up your own halos and have an agreement that, you know, you're not going to use it at certain times. I know they are essential for work, and with so many people working from home, there is a really blurred line about what happens in the family home, and there are times when you will need to use it. But maybe you could enter into that conversation with them as all right, I know how much it irritates you, so I'm going to make sure I sit over here and answer my messages, and I don't do it at the table. I will need to work at this time. This is my working time, and then I will put it away. And whilst we berate children for going down the rabbit warren of YouTube, all of us at various points have done the same thing. But I think my advice would be get into the negotiation really early on, and explain about the things that you like doing that you recognise irritates them, and trying to identify why it is an issue. There will be, you know, the stories that are coming out all the time about fake news, or the way that people's past activity on social media is coming up. Those are good things to get people, your children, talking about and aware of. But to try and set yourself what you're comfortable with, talk to a couple of friends, or talk to us and say, look, what do you think we should be doing? Is it okay if I say to my children, you can have an hour in the morning and you can have an hour in the afternoon, and then I really don't want to see it? Or do we all have a gaming night? You know, do you all use the screen together at the same time? So you're modeling using it in a really healthy and constructive way. And maybe you will have a gaming evening. You know, there's no point it becoming the hidden excitement. Maybe it's time that you all do it together, and you know, your rubbish, they're really good. But it is so much part of everyday life that trying to demystify it and trying to acknowledge the frustrations with it for all of us may or may not help. I'm not saying I have done that perfectly with my own family all the time, but hopefully that's useful.
That's brilliant, thank you. Next question. I'm concerned about what my children post online and their subsequent digital footprint. And I know that we talked about digital footprint and digital tattoo with Jonathan Taylor in one of the previous webinars. So going to pass over to Mrs Lockyer and then to Mr Cowie.
Yes, I think much of what I would say will reiterate what Mrs EJ said there, but in some ways, I think when I'm talking about the prep end of the score, we have it much easier. Absolutely, you should be involved 100% in your children's digital lives. If they have accounts, you know, messages that go through them should be shared with you. And again, if you use the Common Sense Media website, there's a lot of links on there that will tell you how to set up these parental settings. So if your child is using Minecraft, if they're using Roblox and there's messages going on there, they will pop up on your phone as well, so you can monitor it that way. And all the children in prep, I believe, should be monitored that way. It may lead to conversations rather than you cutting it out, but saying, you know, what's this about? Where's this happening? And as Mrs EJ said, sharing that digital time is really important. Modeling good behavior and how to have conversations online and who you should have conversations with and maybe not. But very much in prep school, your online their online presence should be 100% monitored by the parent. I think senior school, Mr Cowie, you will agree, things become a little bit more different.
They do. And in answer to the question or the statement, I am concerned about what my children post online and their digital footprint. As a parent, I am concerned, even though my children are 25 and 27 years old. I continue to be concerned about their digital footprint. But given one of them works in recruitment, she, virtually all her work is done looking at individuals' digital footprint, and that can go way back, as we saw with the cricketer Ollie Robinson. It can go way back to when they were much younger, much less aware of the implications of getting things wrong, and those implications can be life-lasting. So in terms of, you are right to be concerned, and you will always be concerned about what they're posting online, because the digital footprint is there for life. And digital footprint or digital tattoo. One of the things I think is worth considering, do talk to your children, but ask them what they're concerned about their friends. And as they get older, the best way of regulating a pupil's behaviour is what's the norm around them, and get conversations about what they're concerned about, what others might be doing. Not what they are doing, because that's a bit exposing, and certainly not what are you doing online and driving, not encouraging a conversation, but having a conversation so they feel empowered, because basically they'll know an awful lot more about the platforms than you do or we do, and they know what the emerging risks are, because the risks are ever changing and ever moving. So just as you get a surveillance system set up for one platform, so young people will move. But what doesn't change is their concern for others. And that's another thing about the Digital Charter, that it was so refreshing to hear Duncan talking to the students and for their genuine concern about the risks that they identified to others at different ages. So I would say, do talk to your children, but maybe expand it to what is it that, where do they see risks to others, about their friends? What do they think about a cricketer being banned from playing for his country for something he posted maybe 10 years ago? Do they think it's right? And just get them to probe the issues rather than saying, don't do that. Because if you say to many children, don't do it, then you're going to regret that, because they're risk taking. So it's much better to empower them, and that's exactly what's happened through the Digital Charter. It's written by the students for the students, and we will work with them in making that a reality. So as you said, Rachel, we wouldn't look at monitoring everything they do, monitor to a certain extent, but also start building in trust there and have discussions and try and get them to talk as openly about what's going on online as they would talk about what's happening in music or in drama or in football. And I do know at teenage years, conversation can be, it can be difficult to get it flowing. So if you're just overhearing what's said in the back of the car, that can be another good way of just tapping up to what's actually going on there. But I would say the main thing, conversation, try and get conversations going, and try and get the pupils to feel as though you're almost talking to them and you're asking them for advice on things, or to get an insight into risks.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. Now, the next question we've got is how and why would I protect my online identity? Mr Cowie's going to lock horns with that one as well.
Yeah, how should I? Well, it is looking at personal details and restricting the circulation of personal details. That's as an individual, so that you are not a victim of identity theft or any type of grooming, and we know the consequences of that, the severe consequences of that. And again, looking at actual cases and what has happened, and recently it's looking at, from a school's point of view, why should you look at being careful with a circulation of details? We can look at the schools that have been shut down due to ransomware demands, because hackers have found a way into personal details and have managed to shut some schools down. They've shut pipelines down. So if they can do it to large-scale organizations, they can do it to multinational companies, that they will look to exploit individuals. And it's just looking at what are the privacy settings, being sensible with privacy settings, and being conscious of the consequences of, it's like the classic example, you wouldn't leave your door wide open and walk away. You wouldn't leave your personal details left lying around, but without taking sufficient privacy measures in place, that's in effect what you're doing with your personal life. And it's, again, that discussion with children, and they may be getting them to check their devices that the suitable settings are in place, as we would do.
Excellent. So the next question is all about younger children, and obviously having passwords, and they constantly want to share it and keep it secure. There is a fantastic feature, I'm sure many of you are aware of this, is on the Apple products, so on the iPad, and obviously on iPhones, as and when they are old enough, or if they are lucky enough to get an iPhone. But there is just a feature within settings, which is called passwords. So I would very much encourage parents to talk to their younger children about that, and get them to obviously start going into passwords, and they can just go to the plus button, they can add in a website, and then they can obviously add in a passcode. So for example, in the prep school, they have athletics, and they used to have reading eggs, their seesaw password. So it might only be 2 or 3, but getting them into that very, very early habit is an excellent thing to do. And then obviously, as they go through the school, we do very much encourage them to use the passwords, which are, there's a built-in facility within Google, as well as Apple, so that they can store their passwords safely on those devices. And we encourage them obviously to use different passwords, not the same passwords, not 1, 2, 3, 4 or ABCD, which is obviously what they are. They feel safe and comfortable with that. But obviously, as they grow, I think it's really important to get them to be a little bit more complex. Okay, we're going to head over to news and media literacy now. And again, this whole thing about fake news, and I know that Mrs Lockyer is going to talk about how our pupils are being guided on what is fake news. And obviously we've seen a lot of this recently with the various MCOs and government news as well, which some unfortunately has been fake. So over to you, Mrs Lockyer.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we are ensuring that is dealt with across the school is we're making sure that all the teachers have their common sense media digital citizenship training. And alongside that, there are certain lessons, again, written by Common Sense Media, that we drop into school, drop into the wellbeing lessons all the way through prep school and up into the seniors as well. Some of this does talk directly about fake news and ask children to think about their sources, where they're finding information from. Now, of course, down in pre-prep, we're not expecting them to cite their sources in quite the same way as we would up in the seniors, but we do ask them to think about where information came from. And you know, it's an easy thing to pick up with the little ones. Someone will come into the classroom and say, I've heard that school's closing tomorrow. Well, where did you hear that from? How do we know? How can we check that it's true? And you just start that thinking process verbally on anything. And, you know, we can teach them all sorts of ways of doing that with the younger ones. As they get older, of course, they have to consider their sources and resources a little bit more seriously and make sure that they know exactly where information is coming from and why that's so important. As it was mentioned earlier, the digital bubbles that we can live in mean that we only get sources from certain points if we're just relying on social media for our news. So therefore, we need to make sure that we're expanding that circle and knowing where our information comes from and questioning it. But that's, yeah, a job of all the teachers, not just in the wellbeing lessons, but all the way through the school, every lesson that they do, making sure that they're getting and thinking about the information they receive.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to head back to Mr Cowie before finishing off with Mrs EJ. So Mr Cowie, how do pupils become aware of what is right and wrong to communicate? And obviously, as our pastoral head, you probably get to see a lot more of this than anybody else does.
Get to see a lot of it, Mr Ogilvie, that's very true. But I do believe that pupils are very well aware of what's right and wrong in terms of communication and what's acceptable and what's not. Just as they are aware of what's hurtful to say to somebody, then they know what's appropriate to send to somebody. And it is inappropriate to send a joke nude image, whether showing a nude torso with somebody's face superimposed onto it, because what may be seen as a bit of a joke to somebody is going to be hurtful to somebody else, and they are very, very good when questioned about it at explaining, not just saying that was wrong, but why. And it is the why needs to be there in terms of their reflection and understanding on how it makes others feel. And it's that with it. It can be a great tool. Social media can be a great tool, and the various apps that go along with that to build positive relationships. And that's what we're looking at. The Digital Charter is there to help get the best out of technology, not the worst, as that can happen if social media is left to those who would abuse it. But in terms of how do pupils become aware of what is right and wrong to communicate, again, I believe they know. And then if it comes to light at home, if you're aware that your child's done something, just go through the why with them, explain why they did it, and then you can even take it to the extreme of the 5 whys that's going through the Toyota model. You never have to ask more than 5 whys to get to the root of a particular issue, whether it's behavior or whether it's a Toyota engine. And then you're in a position to move forward. But our pupils are very well aware of what appropriate behavior is online and what appropriate behavior is offline. And golden rule, don't share or do anything online that you wouldn't do in person.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mr Cowie. And we're gonna finish off the question section here now with Mrs EJ. Obviously, please do feel free to add any questions in that you'd like us to cover that we haven't covered. It's been great. We've had so many great questions tonight. So Mrs EJ, my child is upset about something that has been posted about them. What should they do?
Oh, hideous. Sadly, as parents, we've all had that horrible moment when it's one thing being hurt yourself, but your child being hurt is a pain and anguish all of its own. So I'm sure all families are adept at helping their children through different agonies of what is going on and what has been unkind about this. And I'm going to go sort of a step back. By the way, please, if something is going on, don't think just because it's happening out of school that we would wash our hands of it. Please do come and talk. If it's having an impact on our children, obviously not in the middle of July when it's tricky for us to see the children regularly. But if you are aware of things that are really inappropriate that are happening through social media, through phone calls, through whatever else is going on out of school, then do come and let us know, because we can. It really is something that works much better if we're all working at it from the same point. But that issue about children being unkind using devices, it comes back to, I sound like Tony Blair, I'm afraid, but education, education, education. We really try and teach the children, every child, so before they're in that hideous position of experiencing something nasty, that they need to be kind as they are with their friends in a room, just as Mr Cowie said, have to act in just the same kind way on a screen, and actually encouraging, if something hideous does happen and your child is upset, then it's not the time to say to them, oh my goodness me, well, this will help you be kinder at the next moment. But it is something for you to remember and talk to them about at a later time when they're feeling less heartbroken. But also the fact that that is a possibility needs to be our motivator when we're talking to our children about how to use social media kindly, finding out times that encourage them to talk to you about times that other people other people aren't being kind, or they've been slightly upset, or they've been unnerved by the things that they have seen or read or heard about. And as Mr Cowie says, they know what is right or what is wrong and need to exercise some confidence in their decision making. It is very easy to get swept along with a group of people. It is quite hard for them to be brave and to say, no, I don't want any more of that any longer, but encourage them and support them to step out of some of the discord or some of the hideous ways that people communicate, which appear to be anonymous, although not necessarily. But some of those ways, encourage them to talk to you about the things that they are, the different apps, the different sites that they are using, so that you can really look at helping them make strong, positive decisions about life generally. I apologise, that's my cat. But also about anything to do with their digital life, because the stronger they are about their own decision making, the stronger they will be in their response to things that come up in their lives which feel very negative. So I suppose I'm not trying to avoid it. We all have ways that we support the children when something negative has happened, but please encourage them to use it as a tool to say, gosh, that is hideous. When did this first start happening? Next time, please talk to me much earlier. Right, let's see what we can do about it. Let's use all the assets at our fingertips. Use school and use it, as I said, at a time in the future maybe, or as a launch pad to one of those conversations about how we use our digital life generally, so we can be critical in our use of it and get all the incredible value for this wonderful technology, without which much of our the last year or so would have been 1,000 times worse. So there are incredible things about that technology and the communication, but also with that comes incredible responsibility for making sure that your use of it is constructive. I hope that answers that.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
I apologise for the cat.
It's fine. It shows we're all human. We're not bots. So those are all the questions that we've had, and I just wanted to open it out to the floor. And if anybody who's obviously on the call tonight, if they've got anything specific that they wanted to ask, which they didn't feel that we perhaps covered, and I know there's a lot of familiar names here that have been to all of the webinars throughout the whole series now. So yeah, I just want to open that up to any questions. Stony silence, which either means we've done a fantastic job or the questions have been wonderful from the parental group and from staff. And that might mean that people are very happy. So if you can just write in the chat, if you have a question, just say yes or no, and then I think we'll wrap it up there for this evening, and then we can all get on our merry way. Thanks, Johannes. That's wonderful. Thanks, Andy.
No, it's lovely to hear that response. And I do want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Duncan for making sure that these are happening and that people are getting used to the fact that they can drop in and out and send the questions. It's really good. It's a scary part of parenting. So it's fantastic to have it. So thanks, Duncan.
No, thank you. Thank you.
It is a scary part of parenting, but it's better to know than not to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We are. I'm really excited. Yeah, we will be back. Series 2 will be back, and what we're aiming to do next year is to obviously get those digital ambassadors on board, more of the pupil voice, so the people that actually, unfortunately, some of them have left the school, but we'll be hearing from our digital ambassadors, and actually we're going to hear about what they're doing. So the real big thing for me next season is all about the positives, talking through and seeing what people are doing, how they've done it, what they've learned from the charter, what sort of difference it's made within their lives, and how we've rolled it out across the college. So I'm very excited about what is next, and hopefully you will continue on this journey with us in 21-22. Excellent. So I'm gonna wrap this up. Obviously, as per usual, if you've got any further questions or anything that you're concerned about, be in contact with.
Duncan, I don't know if you saw it about getting the children's perspective.
Absolutely, and that's 100%. This is what we want to do. We absolutely want to get the digital ambassadors on. We want to get the children on. We want to get their perspective of how they're doing it. I would much rather be sort of taking much more of a backward seat and saying, like, this is, these are the voices, this is how they're living it out. And I think it's really powerful when it comes from our pupil body. So 100% yes. Do encourage your children to speak to us about that and to get their perspective. And if they're happy to come on camera, it would be wonderful.
I certainly think it's something with the older pupils talking to our younger ones. That's going to be really useful.
100%.
They're right. I know we all think that, though.
Yes. Yeah, some honest reflection, perhaps. And who knows, maybe next year we might be able to do some of this face-to-face as well. Who knows?
Let's hope so. Charlie, did you say you had a question? Oh, Andy, has Charlie got a question for us? Okay.
Okay, go for it, Charlie.
Because we're now online, we can't. Obviously, we can't talk to each other because during the lessons. When should we talk to each other? Because during break times, usually we're off screen, but there's no other possible way for us to talk to our friends.
I know, it's really frustrating. I know, Charlie, that lots of the teachers are using breakout rooms when there are chances for you to talk, but it's really important to make sure you've got time out of the school day. It's very artificial compared to a normal school day where you can chatter in between and walking to lessons. I couldn't agree more. It is really hard, but I think there are times when you're screen free, when you should set up times that you can chat to each other. And it is really important to make those play times, those times when you can chat. And even in an MCO, when you're not allowed to travel around very much, to have a chance to get on and chat. And I was just been talking to your parents about you know, there are times when you want to game together because that's a good way of you being able to communicate and chat to each other. So it is much harder. I completely understand. It's much harder than during a normal school day. But there are times. There are times. Have a look at your schedule for tomorrow and see if there's a time, and maybe arrange with your friends that you do all chat.
Okay, thank you.
All right, lovely. Oh, it's lovely to chat to you, sweetheart. Yes, I wish I could make it easier. I wish my magic wand worked, but it didn't. Yeah, there you go. We've already got someone there. But let's hope we have, the next term brings us a far more normal time.
100%,
Okay.
absolutely. Wonderful. Right. Okay. We've nearly been on for an hour, which always is a little bit scary, but I feel as though we've filled the airwaves with very positive content and really good chat. So I'm going to wish everybody a fantastic evening. Stay safe. I hope the next 2.5 weeks goes as smoothly as it can do for everyone. And I hope that obviously come July, we might have a little bit more ability to, as the young Mr. Wilson's saying, to have that vital contact with our friends and talk to people face to face. So feels like an episode of Crime Watch. I'm sort of saying, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and don't have nightmares. So we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good one. Bye bye. Take care.